because my battery, I guess I forgot to turn it off. Anyway, so we're going to finish up 7, and I'm going to give the Logos to Telos. And I wanted you to get a great example of an unstated telos is today. What belongs to God? Wait. You know that? So if it says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, what belongs to Caesar? Nothing, according to the Bible and Jesus. So should you give anything to Caesar? Oh, by the way, how many kingdoms are there? A kingdom divided among itself. What did Jesus say that? Oh, my goodness. So anyway, I'm just saying, that's unstated telos. So I'll give you some unstated teli, and you figure out what to do with them. But I'm just saying that's what we look at, and that's what we're all about. Now, we're going to see something very interesting, and I don't know if we'll get right to it, but 753 is the beginning of this problem thing. The earliest manuscripts and many other ancient witnesses do not have John 7:53 to 8:11. A few manuscripts include these verses, but not the early ones. The early ones do not. Wholly or in part, either after John 7:36, John 21:25, Luke 21:28, or Luke 24:53. So, where should these verses go? Well, they should go in the garbage. They're Gnostic. They're Gnostic ads, and this was a Gnostic ad that we're not sure how it got in. I suspect it got in like there's 2 parts in Mark, and when we studied Mark, we saw they were ads. So, they're not in the earliest manuscripts. So if we're going to hold by the manuscript, the bibliographical process for knowing what is viable. And also, when we look at these in the Greek, well, as a matter of fact, let's start with the Greek. Okay?
Ironic, they're probably one of the most quoted verses
I was just
in
going
the
to say,
Bible, and it's not.
yeah, both misused and used, used and abused.
Well, it's the only time that Jesus opposed the Torah. That's an unstated telos yourself right there. So if you got Jesus opposing the Torah.
But he didn't actually say she didn't deserve the stoning, right? But he knew that the crowd had problems in their heart, so he said, well, you can stone her, but...
What did Jesus say should be done to those who teach others and don't follow the Torah? A millstone should be put around their neck, and they should be thrown into the sea. Basically, corporal punishment for, not corporal punishment, death. The death penalty for teaching others not to follow the Torah. In that verse, Jesus did not follow the Torah. And matter of fact, well, you tell me, where is it? It's not found in the earliest manuscripts, but it's found, it says, a few manuscripts. Why do you think they want to include it all the time? And we'll get to them eventually. It's Gnostic. And you can really take a lot of sins and put them under the rug with that one. Right?
He did tell her go and sin no more too. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like he said it was okay what she did. But he was also condemning the people who brought her, but they caught her in adultery, meaning they led the man. They knew who he was and they let him off.
Well, let's wait till we get to it and actually see it in the Greek. But we'll start with this, because this verse is not included in any real John. Matt, it's not included in any of the Johns or Luke. It's just added.
It'd be an easy memorization verse.
Yeah. Well, this is the last verse in 7. We don't know where it should go, and it's not in any of the early documents. So that's the point I want to make. You choose whether you want to go with it or not. I'm just saying it's not in the earliest manuscripts. And we don't know what manuscript or where it's supposed to be, right? And by the way, the versifications in the chapters were all added later. So it's a double whammy. Anyway, then they all went home. Does that sound like any verse we've seen yet? Let's see what it says in the Greek. Here's the Greek right there, but here it is, King James. And every man went into his own house. And here's the Greek. Kai. Eporis is saying, this is that word. Remember the word that says going port to port, which is a really cool Greek word? It was used before about going, are you going to Athens? Are you going to the diaspora, right? And here, they're using the same word for going home. It literally means to transverse. It means to transverse from port to port. Each or every one, hekastos. Have we seen hekastos before? This is a very common word in Greek, but we haven't seen this form of the word in Greek. To or into, we've seen that. The oikon, we've seen oikon, of him. So a very simple sentence, but we get two words that are really odd. And we really haven't seen this form before. Here's a translation, each of them transversed into his own dwelling. Very simple short verse, uses the three words we haven't seen before. It's interesting, but it points, we will see further. If you notice the field of this Greek is very different than all the other Greek we looked at. So whatever you want, you can do whatever you want with it, but I'm just telling you, and I'll remind you, these verses are not found in any ancient documents. They're late. They're late, apparently late ads. We have no idea where, and if you look at your NIV, it'll tell you the exact same thing. I've talked to pastors about this over and over again. You know what the pastor's answer is? Probably shouldn't be in there. It should be excluded because it's not in the ancient documents. Nobody knows where it comes from. And we'll look at the Greek. Yes, sir. Who canonized it? Who canonized it? That's a great question. Justin Martyr, when he translated the Greek into Latin, his sources were pretty late Greek sources. So he may or may not have had access to it. But Gnosticism was really powerful and coming up in about the 300s. So, it was being fought by the church, and the church developed a lot of their things to fight Gnosticism. But some of the Gnostic ads got in, and mostly because they showed up in the Douay, the Latin version. The Vulgate. Douay is the English translation of Vulgate. But they got stuck in there because, and where does it go? There's no versification, no chapters at all in the Vulgate originally, right? That wasn't until about 800 AD when they started chapterizing stuff. And later, when they started adding the statements, the verses, we call it verses. I call them statements because I want to stay away from the idea of verses. But anyway, so these are all late ads, but the real big deal is that we probably Justin, when he did the translation of the Vulgate into Latin, that's where we get a lot of our strange words and words. That's where they invented resurrection. There's no word for resurrection in any language until basically Latin. And Latin's pretty cool because you can make, it's kind of like Greek, except Greek they never did, right? They never invented a word for resurrection in Greek. They said agerios ek nekros or egerio ex nekros, to rise up in the marketplace or to rise from sleep from the dead. That's the way they describe it, as a statement in Greek. So it's really telling, should be telling to everyone that there is no word in any language for resurrection from death until basically Latin. And Latin, they just wanted, that's pretty cool. The Latin thinkers, right? Romans, right? Roman thinkers, right? So you haven't been in a class first class, but we talked about, the Greek thinking, the Roman thinking, and the Hebrew thinking. And the Roman thinking is like an engineer. So what's an engineer want to do with words?
Build them.
Build them.
That
make
way
them.
Germans build all words in
Yeah.
their language. They can make any word, like long word.
The longest word in German that I know is Feueraufkunftsgebäude. Feueraufkunftsgebäude. That means fire insurance building. The Germans just take words and make their own words, and it's really cool. Latin does that too. But, it's not, the Greeks do that, but the Greeks kind of like to keep things simple because they don't want to, they don't borrow words. It's barbarian, right? Barbarian time. Anyway, so this whole thing can be interesting, but let's look at 7 and the logos to telos. I gave you notes, okay? This is how I do my manuscripts. So I got here the manuscript, and let's look at this. Sorry if this is boring to some of you, but I want you to understand chapter 7 before we move on to the next. So I simplified yours even simpler, but this is basically how it goes. So first of all, the outline for John 7, the logos, it's a logos to telos. The logos to telos, I'll explain to you, Tara, is all Greek ancient documents. And I'm a Greek guy. I'm not a koinonia or a theologian guy. I'm just a Greek guy. So I do ancient Greek, and I do basically classical Greek, which is Athenian Greek. So I learned basically on Socrates and Plato and that kind of thing. So when you talk about all ancient Greek documents, they are logos to telos, a logical argument to an unstated conclusion. The telos. The telos does not really mean conclusion, but that's usually the way we translate it. So in the New Testament documents, which are Greek documents, and they're very well-written Greek documents, you're going to find that they're all logos to telos. And so that's what we're discovering, that John is a beautiful logos to telos, probably the best of all the Gospels. In fact, that's what my argument has been, and I'll remind you guys, but, you know, it sure smells like a Greek and Roman audience document as opposed to an Hebrew kind of document, especially with the words that are used in the way that it addresses the hearers. So let's look at the logos to telos. First of all, Jesus, it says, was all over Galilee because Judeans were planning to kill him. So that was the problem. So the Festival of Booths came up. That's 7 plus 1 day with Rosh Hashanah as the last day. And so it's a pilgrim festival. So everybody's supposed to go to Jerusalem. You go, you do the mikvah, you do the teruma, you do the sacrifices, you live in a booth for 7 days, and then Rosh Hashanah. We talked about that. The siblings, his siblings, and this is his siblings, really, no kidding, his brothers and sisters said, you got to go to Judea. And I put in here to die. Remember, the Judeans were planning to kill him, so he stayed out of Judea. He was in the Galilee, where he was the rabbi of Capernaum. His siblings told him to do that because they weren't convinced. Did they want him to die? Did they want to get rid of him? I mean, you know, remember, this is a Greek document. So what's your conclusion? Why would your siblings tell you, hey, you know, the Judeans are trying to kill you, but go ahead and go to Judea, right? Right? And they said, do it openly, right? Because they said, go openly. Well, that's really good advice, right? Go openly, they're trying to kill me. All right, you know, you get this. Hey, look, I'm telling you, John is full of funny, full of humor. But we don't get it because we read it like, oh, it's got to be a gospel, no humor. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think they were being sarcastic? Because, like, weren't they saying, well, if you're the Messiah, you should go. Like, well, you know, what's going to harm you? And because they didn't believe he really was.
They weren't convinced. And what you're saying, okay, what do you think a Greek person would say? The ancient Greek. They would say, irony, satire? Oh, yeah, give me more of that, right? So, yeah, you know, I would read it that way. I'd read it in every way possible. I'd say, number one, look, do you think Jesus is a happiness for their family? No. Yes, sir.
Could they be concerned for their own sake?
I would say that is also a beautiful conclusion, you know, unstated telos, because if they go, what does everybody know? Aren't you the brother of the rabbi from Capernaum? Isn't he that guy that caused all those problems? Isn't he? Did he really feed 5,000 guys? You know, right? So, do they want to answer questions like that? No, they don't want to talk about it, right? So if Jesus goes, nobody's going to bother them. So I think you're right on the money. I think you're thinking this correctly. We read this, these are just a few verses, but we read it like, oh, yeah, you know, sure. You know, this is the way it goes, right? No, there are unstated teli. There's unstated telos throughout this whole setup. And matter of fact, this is a very complex setup. That's why, these outlines are really important to kind of give you a picture of this. So Jesus says, though, this is a telos. It's a stated telos. Yours is all the time, but it's not my time, right? And we know why it's not the time, because number one, he has not been anointed as priest or king. Hasn't happened. So therefore, if he's not anointed, he can't be the sacrifice. You got to be anointed to be the sacrifice. You got to be anointed to be the king and high priest. There's huge things in this. But he says it's not my time, but yours is all the time. Look, this is, I pulled off jokes and put in telos, but this is a joke. Do you see what he's just slammed his siblings, right? He said, anytime's okay with it for you, but not for me. I have destiny. I have something I'm supposed to do, right? And he makes this statement. I pulled this out of yours. I think created can't hate you. The creation can't hate you. The cosmos can't hate you, but it hates me because I bear witness that its toils are bad. I bear witness that its actions are bad. Jesus went up anyway. He said he wasn't going to go, but he went, and I told you that's not false witness. We don't. We have this funny thing in our culture about false witness versus lies. If your wife asks, do I look beautiful in this, or do I look fat in this dress? Your answer is, of course not, honey. Doesn't matter, right? Because some people say, oh, that's sin. But that's not false witness. That's just being kind.
That's preserving your life.
That's right. That's right. Self-preservation. But when Jesus told him he wasn't going to go up, just think about this. I think Rick has the tiger by the tail. Why do you think he told him he wasn't going to go up?
Misdirection.
What's that?
Misdirection.
Misdirection. Look, how much pain and suffering would this cause his siblings?
Well, in the ancient world, they didn't have much qualms about lumping the family together and punishing the whole unit.
It's true. I just think that Jesus is punishing them, right? He's basically telling them, oh, yeah, you go. I'll stay back here in Capernaum. I'll be teaching my sermons in Capernaum. Everybody else is gone, right? And then Jesus goes up to Jerusalem, and everyone's looking for him. He's not supposed to be there, right? And what does his brothers say when everybody asks, hey, where's the rabbi of Capernaum? He didn't come. He didn't come.
This is a pilgrim festival, though, where they're supposed to go. I mean, if you don't go, that's one of the 36.
It's one of the 36, yes. They don't do today.
Right, they can't.
They can't. Well, they could, but they don't, right? You could go to Jerusalem. You can't do the sacrifices, but you could do the booths, right? You could do the booths in Rosh Hashanah. But, yeah. And by the way, the Jewish people still believe that if you don't hear the trumpet at Rosh Hashanah, the shofar, yeah, you broke one of the 36. So this is one of the 36 unforgivables. So Jesus, of course, Jesus went up, right? When everyone's looking for him, no one is speaking openly because. So, okay, picture this. I told you the way the grace thing works, right? Cuddies. All right, so you got a rich guy and a poor guy walking down the street, and the poor guy ain't going to say nothing. The rich guy is going to be like, in the Greek worldview, the God's walking down the street. In the Christian worldview, God's walking down the street, Jesus walking down the street, and he sees the poor guy or whoever coming up. And what does he say? Cuddies, grace. We call it grace, but it's cuddies. It's a greeting. The whole point of this is that. So, picture this. Jesus is walking down the street in Jerusalem. Mary was like, hey, isn't that the rabbi of Capernaum? What's Jesus doing? Cuddies. So what do they ask him? Do you think anybody's going to ask him? Hey, are you the rabbi of Capernaum? No. He's like totally like, hey, cuddies. Everybody's like, they're not speaking to him. It says they're not speaking to him because the Judeans are planning to kill him. And what do you want to not do? What you said is right on. It's not just the family members.
Like followers, which is why Peter denied Christ, because he's all afraid.
Yeah. You know, remember, if it's mentioned once, it's probably happened 50 times, right? 100 times, whatever. The big deal is, old Jesus is there, and no one's talking about it. No one's talking to him. No one's acknowledging him. So, no one's speaking to him. So, in the middle of the festival, Jesus in the sacred place in the temple, he's teaching. Do you teach in the temple? No, you sacrifice in the temple. The temple's not teaching. That's the synagogue. So he's a rabbi of Capernaum who would be what? Teaching in Capernaum in a synagogue, right? Where is he teaching? In the temple. This is huge. So, like I said, everybody's like, right? And he goes to the middle of the temple in the middle of the festival of booths when everything's happening, and he says, starts teaching. So the first question is, how does he know the writings? How does he know the Talmud, the Mishnah? How does he know the stuff that you're not supposed to know? You know, he's supposed to know the Torah and Tanakh. Maybe not so much the Tanakh. But he knows the Torah. Everybody knows the Torah. Everybody's memorized the Torah. But the Mishnah and the Talmud, this guy is teaching. How does he know the writings? And Jesus says this, my instruction is not of myself, contrariwise from God. It's from God, not from me. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And he goes on, he says, do God's will. My instruction is from God and from me. All right, now what did he just say? That's going to tell us. I didn't mark it. He just says God. Yeah. I love this, how John slips this in. I'm just giving you the outline, right? So you can see these, how they work out. Okay, and he goes on, he says, words from yourself are self-seeking doxa. Remember doxa? Who's his audience, right? It's the Romans. Yeah, doxa means, we translate it glory, but it's a lot deeper than glory. But he says, words from yourself are self-seeking doxa. In other words, you're glorifying yourself. But if you seek doxa for another, that's good. That's true. So whose doxa is he seeking? Whose glory is he trying? Who's he trying to glorify? God. Yeah, God the Father. But he just made a statement that he is God. Look, these are beautiful unstated teli in here. The law Torah. So he goes on. He says self-seeking doxa. So he says he's giving doxa about God. But then he goes on, he says, the Torah, not one keeps the law. No one keeps the law. So therefore, why do you plot to kill me? Now, he's not talking about himself. He's talking about the others. And he gives an example, how you don't follow the law, don't follow the Torah. Here's a telos setup right afterwards. The throng concluded when he said this, because basically he slacked. This is the slack of the Pharisees. Because he says, and to the priests, the Sadducees, because he says, no one follows the law, no one's following the Torah, so why do you plot to kill me? Okay, and here's the Torah telos setup. The throng concluded that a demon or God, you have a demon or God inside of you, because who's seeking to kill you, right? Who's seeking to kill you? Well, we know from the very beginning that John told us Jesus was all over Galilee because Judeans were planning to kill him. Okay, this is a setup. It's like a joke. I shouldn't use the word joke, but I love the word joke because it really is. This is a setup of humor in Greek. And they're getting ready for you. They're going, this is kind of like you always got to have I'm not good with jokes, but you have a joke set up, right? And then it's bump, and that's what we're waiting for, the bump part. So the throng concluded there's a demon god that's in you because who seeks to kill you? Who seeks to kill you? And they basically say that the demon god inside of you seeks to kill you. Jesus says, one toil I did, one sign I did, and you all wonder. This is really important because it equates signs and toils, right? Signs are the semeion in Greek. And here's his example. Law. Circumcision did not come from Moses. That's what he said, and it's true. Who gave him circumcision?
Well, God through Abraham.
God through Abraham, not through Moses. And I need to mention this just because it's really cool. Why do you think, where did they get circumcision? I came from God, but why do you think God gave them circumcision? The Egyptians. Egyptians and Scythians circumcised. The only people in the world that we know of that circumcised. And so if they went to Egypt and they were circumcised, the Egyptians would say, you're one of us. That's right. That's, by the way, why, what's his name? Joseph. Joseph was allowed to be a slave to a wealthy guy in his household instead of going where? Yeah. Building the pyramids, right? Instead of building the pyramids, exactly. So this is really important stuff. Circumcision didn't come from Moses, it came from God, or not from Moses, from God. But on the seventh day you circumcise. So you're doing what? On the seventh day on Shabbat. On Shabbat you are working, doing work. Yeah. Torah is not bound because you do it, but he says, I made you bilious. When I made a man healthy, I healed a man on the Sabbath. And he's referring back to when he healed that guy that was in the pool of Siloam. He healed him, and the pool of Siloam is a mikvah. And so he healed the paraplegic guy and told him, hey, pick up your thing and walk around. He's referring back to that event. So it's all the way back there. Remember I told you, in Greek documents, you can't forget what happened before. You got to keep it all in mind. The Greeks expect your attention span to be this long, not this long. Not like a commercial.
American.
Yeah, 30 seconds commercial, right? And then he gives this statement. He says, do not distinguish through sight. Distinguish with your mind. And what's important about this is that's we have sarx, the flesh, that's sight. Suke, the thoughts or mind, and pneuma. And he didn't tell you to use your pneuma. He says use your thoughts. And by the way, this is the message of Christ in Matthew. We see it in Mark. We see it in Luke. It's a message of who? Paul, right? Paul tells them over and over again, use your thoughts. Your thoughts are what control your spirit and your sarx. So it's a huge saying that's really important. Don't distinguish through sight, distinguish with your mind. Is he not whom they seek to plot or tell? Right, that's what the people are saying. This is a stated telos.
Which again is funny because they just said, who's trying to kill you? Like it doesn't even make any sense.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense. That's why Jesus makes this comment before. Don't distinguish through sight, distinguish through your mind and your thoughts. And so they say, is he not whom they seek to plot or kill outright? Remember they said a demon, a god or demon is trying to kill him? This is a ha. When a Greek person hears that, what do they think?
The religious leaders are the evil force.
Yeah. It's okay. The people themselves said it. A god or demon is trying to kill you, right? You think that a god or demon is trying to kill you, and then they make the conclusion that they're trying to kill him. Who's trying to kill you? Therefore, the leaders have in them a god or demon. You know, like I said, the euphemism, this is a disguised euphemism that is beautiful in the Greek. Greek's really concrete. So they want you, like I said, these are unstated telos. Just a beautiful unstated telos. And this is the conclusion of this. He speaks, no one contradicts him. Since when did the rulers know he was the Christ? Okay, the first argument has a stated, it's an unstated telos because you have to figure out the answer yourself. they don't give you the answer, right? They give you a question. The question is, when did the leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the priests and the Pharisees, when did they know that he was the Christ? Yes.
Does that kind of double down on the whole tell us that the religious leaders are the evil force? Because they're saying the religious leaders know he's the Messiah, but they're trying to kill the Messiah.
Yes, because see, I don't mean to repeat over and over again, but I have to repeat this. We have been taught, the professors and professorettes and all these people who don't understand Greek very well in our universities and other things, try to make it out that these documents are simplistic. Oh, they're simplistic documents. Mark has simple Greek. Yeah, it has pretty simple Greek, but it's very Greek in Logos to Telos. These are very complex documents. I told you, when we did Mark, if you remember years back, Mark is a very beautiful and complex, but the arguments are solid. They're obvious. John, on the other hand, is giving us some really, really, really deep arguments, and they're internal. They're not just A equals B and B equals C, and therefore A equals C. They're not a really simple logical construction. They are very good logical constructions, but they have very deep euphemistic. Remember, Greeks aren't into euphemism. How do the Greeks work euphemism into stuff? The Logos to Telos. So what you're seeing is these multiple logical arguments that have all kinds of really deep meaning. Was that?
Entwined?
Entwined. Yeah, entwined that are, we read them in English, we go, oh, yeah, I've heard that before. But really, what I'm trying to do in these outlines is track these arguments for you. So you can see how the arguments fit together, and you can go, oh, really? And see, we get, this is why I love it when you guys, I seek aha moments. This is my teaching. When I applied to be I was a teacher at Athens. When I applied to be a teacher at WSU, they didn't ask me to come teach for them. But I wrote their paper. They say, what's your teaching technique? My teaching technique is aha moments. I want to present material to you so that you have the aha moments. And then in the class, when you get them, tell me what you got. Because, I can't tell you everything that's in. If I were to sit here and tell you everything that's in chapter 7, we'd probably be here for a year. And you say, we've already been here too long. The big deal is that we're trying to tease out as much as we can. And a lot of it is not, I just can't express. There's so much to express in here. So I can't really give you everything. But, you can determine even more that there is. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking that last top bullet points there, what they're basically saying, if nobody's contradicting him, then they realize that he is the Christ. And when did they figure this out? Is what that basic question is.
Exactly. And that's the end of the first argument, the first major argument. The second argument is this, and we throw this away, but this is a very important argument. I want you to really pay attention to this. It says, we see from what place you come. Christ comes. Where does he come from? He comes from Galilee. He's the rabbi of Capernaum. But the Christ comes from some place we don't know, from an unknown place. This is a confusing argument to us because we're like, huh? Why is this even important? It's really important because of what John does with it. Now, to us, we're like, we've heard this 1,000 times. We don't care. But let's see what it says. Jesus makes an answer. Jesus is in the temple, again, in the temple, and he speaks. You see me and see where I am. Right here in the temple. From myself, I am not. He who sent me, you don't see. Therefore, what? You don't know where I'm from. Okay. Now, as good Greeks, you should go, wow, this is a no kidding, logical, rational argument. It's a if you want to say this is a rhetorical, rhetoric. Anybody studied rhetoric? It's painful. Don't do it. Yeah, rhetoric. I had to get my son through rhetoric class. Tammy did it. I didn't want to touch it because rhetoric in logic is really not my thing. I am a Boolean mathematical logic person. Like trigonometry, that kind of thing. That appeals to me. And this is that kind of statement, a Greek statement. He says, you see me and see where I am. Where am I? In the temple. From myself, I am not. In other words, I'm not representing myself. He who sent me, you don't see. Who sent him? God sent him. He's in the temple. So therefore, you don't know where I'm from unless you're convinced. That's what the unstated point of this is. And this goes on. It says, I stare at him, at God, because I am, ego eimi, from him. Likewise, he set me apart. Jesus is doubling down on the thing. The answer is they sought to capture him, but no one did, not at the time. That should be an indicator to you. So he makes this statement, and therefore, when he makes this statement, why do you think this statement really upset them?
Well, it's clear he's the Messiah. He's coming from God.
Well, they said, since when did you know he was the Christ? So therefore, the people now believe or think they're convinced. Large numbers. We'll get to that because it'll tell us about this.
But not everybody. Some of them said, verse 31, when the Christ appears, will he do more signs?
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. But you're right. But see, what's happened is everybody is, the crowd is saying this. Since when do they know he's the Christ? Do you know anyone? Right? Now, Jesus doubles down because he didn't say he's just the anointed one. He says, I stare at him because he sent me. He sent me, right? But he says, I am from him. Making that statement to a Hebrew audience immediately means that he is claiming to be God. Now, there's more to this. Because remember, do the Greeks use the I am constructions very much? It's an absolute statement of identity. So if a Greek person says that, it's like it's an absolute claim. And so the Hebrews know that, the Greek, and they're all Greek speakers. So all the Greek speakers know that, which are all the Hebrews, and all the Romans. If the Romans don't understand Greek, what are they doing? They're tapping on the shoulders of everybody and saying, what did he say? Right? Because they want to know what this guy is saying. And in Latin, although Latin, the I am forms are more common, it's still not common. In the ancient world, it's not common. Likewise, he set me apart. So if you go back, this means that he is claiming to be from God, and he's making the I am claim. Oh, come on, wake up. Here we go. All right. So they sought to capture him. Nobody could. The people are convinced. Okay? Many were convinced because of the signs. And remember, that's what he said. I do one sign or toil, and you are convinced. And here's the conclusion of the joke. Nice left-in joke. It is the telos of this thing. The Greeks love comedy. And look, they love comedy, right? This is comedic. Conclusion of this telos. The Pharisees under oarsmen, the Pharisees send their under oarsmen to capture him, right? And before it says they sought to capture him, but no one did, not at this time. So the Pharisees under oarsmen seek to capture him, and Jesus said, I am, ego eimi, with you a short time, and he uses the word chronos. Now, why is chronos so important? Because chronos, if he had used the word pathos, or he'd used their other words in Greek for time, but instead he used chronos. Chronos means the time of the gods. Again, what did he just do? He said he was divine. Now, we miss this because, we're not, usually looking at the Greek. We're not usually looking at these intimate forms in the Greek. But Jesus just did another knee slapper, face slapper. He says, I'll be with you a short time of the gods, and I lead forward to God. They lead forward. This is a word we say something. I can't remember what we translated it to. Anyway, it's literally, I lead forward to God. I think I left it in yours as I lead to God. Literally, he's saying that if you're going to God, who's in the front of the line? Jesus. And what's the joke here is the Pharisees said they're under-oarsmen, and the under-oarsmen literally mean those who are following the leader, the hyphenation, whatever, in this word that's used in the Greek. So I lead forward to God. You will not find me, and wherever I am, you are not able to come. Okay? And again, he uses the ego eimi form. Judeans ask, and this is everybody, they ask, so where is he going? Is he going to the dispersion? He's going to teach the Greeks and the Jews in the Greek diaspora. This is where we see that word eporsin, which means traversing from port to port. It's not used, in Greek. I never, ever, ever use this word to mean I'm going home, unless I'm going to Athens, across the water. I'm going to Rome, okay? For them to say, eporsin, to my dwelling, to my oikos, means I'm going from where? Jerusalem to Maritana to Athens on a boat, okay? So again, it's a really funny usage that they used in the words later on when we get to 53. So they ask, is he going to go teach the Greeks and the Jews in the diaspora? And he makes a declaration. That's the end of this point, not the end of the argument. But then he makes a declaration as Messiah. So at Rosh Hashanah, we saw this. Jesus stands up in the temple, and at the end of the 118th Psalm, when the high priest says, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, and he says, blessed is he who comes in the name of, because he won't say Yahweh out loud. And he waits for the Messiah to stand up and announce himself. And guess what Jesus does? Stands up, announces himself, and he says these words, if one thirst, come forward to me and imbibe. And he's making double, triple, you can say entendre, double, triple assertions here, because the water, right? They just brought the water from the pool of Shiloah all the way up to the temple, and they're supposed to pour that water onto the altar. And they're going to make sure they see it, because the last time they did it and missed, they tore them apart, according to some scholars. It's funny how the modern thing doesn't say that, but Josephus clearly says that they ripped them apart. Anyway, because he didn't get the water on. So he makes a declaration of Messiah, and he says, if anyone thirsts, and by the way, this goes back to the woman at the well, right? Our greatest scholar that we found in the New Testament. The woman at the well, Jesus says to her, I will give you drink, right? That refers, I will give you living water. And she recognizes that he's the Messiah and the anointed one, which is the whole point here. So, imbibe, it says here, if you're convinced of the writings, because of the writings, torrents from out of your insides will overflow with living water. And this all comes, I've got the stuff, I gave it to you when we went through it in the notes. And it says that this was said through pneuma, right? It says this was said through pneuma. Jesus said, don't try to rely on your sight, use your thoughts. And then he responds about this through pneuma. At this point, though, John tells us the pneuma is not yet free. The pneuma is the Ruach HaKodesh. That is the Holy Spirit, right? The Ruach HaKodesh, that's Hebrew, the Hagios pneuma, the awful breath of God, literally. So the Hagios pneuma is not yet free because Jesus is not yet sacrificed. This is a huge point. And not only is he not yet sacrificed, he has not been anointed. We can't forget that. Matter of fact, in the anointing process, how do you prepare a sacrifice to be sacrificed? You have to inspect it. Well, and when you're sacrificing it, you have to place your hands on it and press. And that, is a symbol that the sins are going from you to the sacrifice. So therefore the sins die with the sacrifice. There's more to it than this, because eventually, the sacrifice is anointed. But Jesus has to be anointed because he is going to be the high priest, number one, and the king. So he has to be anointed. So we can't have a sacrifice until the anointing. This is huge. And everybody here knows this, right? We don't know it because we just don't talk about it much. But this is a huge and important point that was made before in this. But there's a split, and this is the split you said. So the people are split. Some say he is, the people are saying that he is the true foreteller. He is the true prophet. He's Isaiah. Whoever Isaiah is. He is whoever he's supposed to be, that's the true foreteller, the true prophet that came from God to announce becoming the Messiah, right? Or be the Messiah. They don't know. Rambam hasn't occurred yet. Rambam in the 1400s has to tell them what happened. Others say he is the Christ. Now, what's really important about this is how many others you think are saying he's the Christ. Remember at the beginning they said, when did you know he was the Christ? Well, if they're asking that question, what's their conclusion? It's probably a large amount. So everybody is pretty much saying he's the true foreteller, but others are saying he's the Christ. It's probably a big bunch. Others say, and here's the big thing, the Christ comes not out from among Galilee, from the Galilee, right? The Christ does not come from Galilee. And here's the unstated telos. He's not from Galilee, he's from Bethlehem. That probably had the Greek audience and even the Romans. The Romans are probably doing how the golf, right? How you don't fully understand something, but you're like, everybody's laughing and rolling on the floor, and you go, ha, 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 right? So all the Romans are going, ha, ha, ha. The Greeks are what? They're rolling on the floor. They think that's so funny because they all know that Jesus was born in Nazareth or in Bethlehem, right?
It's not really even unstated exactly because verse 42 says, has not the scripture said that Christ comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was? So it's basically stated.
Well, it's
still in a question, but
it's still a question.
But still, I mean, clearly, and it's like the answer is like yes, because Jesus is of David's house and line and was born in Bethlehem.
That's for the Romans.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. It's for the Romans because all the Greeks should know this, right? Everybody's memorized it, and they've all memorized it, right? They know it, but he wants to make sure they know because the Romans are still wondering. The Romans are still scratching their heads. Well, what does that mean, right? And he goes, the Messiah comes from Bethlehem, and then they go, oh yeah. In Matthew, that's what we read in Matthew. It said, right? Yeah, this is just really fun stuff. Anyway, not from God, from Bethlehem, and then there's the quotes, and that comes from the writings, right? And the under-oarsmen. Now here's the under-oarsmen were sent. Come on, wake up. They need to turn on a longer delay, right? So the under-oarsmen, right? They sent the under-oarsmen. They sent the followers of the Pharisees, basically the temple guard, to get him. And they say that the Pharisees and the chief priests, the priests, the Sadducees say, why didn't you catch him? Why didn't you bring him home? Why didn't you take him into the temple and take him captive? Because he's right there. He's standing up among the people. He's claiming to be the Messiah. And they said to him, no man uttered words like this man. This is so stated to tell us. Therefore, he is not a man. It's beautiful. Okay, and it says, and then this is another telos, or another logos that they start. So, not any Pharisee was convinced into him. That's a statement made in John that they claim, the Pharisees claim and the Sadducees claim, not any Pharisee is convinced into him, except in the 3rd chapter we had back. We don't know if Nicodemus is fully convinced, but who sent Nicodemus? And even before that, who sent the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the priests, to John to ask him about John and Jesus? Who sent them? They just went on their own? No. The Pharisees sent them, right? So the Pharisees, they may be claiming that they're not convinced. The people said, when did you know? Right? When did you know he was the Christ? Well, the woman at the well immediately knew that he was Christ, Messiah, right? When did you know? The Pharisees said, no, not a Pharisee. There's no Pharisees convinced. But we got Nicodemus sent by the Pharisees. Yes, sir.
I always had the idea that Nicodemus kind of went to Jesus on the sly.
It says that he was sent. And it says, I think it's, for sure, they said it was sent. And not only that, it says he calls him rabbi. He calls him rabbi. So he acknowledges him as the basically, the rabbi of Capernaum.
You're one of us.
Yeah, you're one of. What does it say?
Verse 3:2 just says, this man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, etc.
But I think when we looked at it, we saw that in the Greek, it basically makes the claim that he was. Okay, why would he come by, if he were sent, why would he come by night? Exactly, and so they couldn't say. The obvious thing is, you see the Pharisee? Hey, look, Nicodemus is obviously a Pharisee. You'd be like, obviously a fighter pilot, right? Because you have a flight suit on. They look really cool. That's what you do when you're a fighter pilot. You look cool. So you always wear your flight suit. So Nicodemus is always wearing his robes, right? You're a NASCAR driver. You're always wearing your NASCAR stuff, right? You're special. So you look cool, right? So anyway, Nicodemus was looking cool. So he didn't want anybody to know that he's going to see Jesus, but it's obvious that he went. Now, Nicodemus, there's an unstated telos here because Nicodemus may not be convinced, but yet we find out later, right? Nicodemus went to the tomb, and I think it's in John. I can't remember which gospel it's in. But here's what Nicodemus says. Nicodemus makes the second argument. The Torah is not distinguished. In other words, the Torah doesn't judge if he knows not what he has done. In other words, just like U.S. law, you have to be confronted by your witnesses, and you have to be confronted they have to tell you what you did wrong. That's by law. They can't just do a Stalin or a Hitler-esque thing and pull you into court and say, sign some papers, you did something wrong, we won't tell you what you did wrong. Yeah, they do that. And who's your witness? Witnesses? Right. Oh, you don't have to have witnesses. Oh, you raped this girl at school, but there's no witnesses.
We're gonna come at you with all these charges, and you don't have the money or the resources to defend against us. So take this plea deal and admit that you did it, and you'll be better off.
If you're not careful, a judge will say you can't. They're gonna what they call it, where they hush, where they won't let you talk about it.
Gag order.
A gag order. So we're going to have a gag order so you can't talk about it before or afterwards. Yeah. Ooh, that's Soviet. Yeah, I used to fight the Soviets. That's the way the Soviets work. It's really good. Anyway, this is what Nicodemus says. The Torah says that you have to tell him what he did and you have to confront him with the crime. You have to know what they did. And here's their answer. They say a foreteller stands up not in the marketplace in Galilee. This is a beautiful logos to tell us. Because where are they? Jerusalem in the temple, right? So the Pharisees' answer is the foreteller. Everybody says he's a true foreteller, But the foreteller stands up in the market, does not stand up in the marketplace in Galilee. But every Greek hearer of this knows, are they in Galilee? Where did he stand up in the marketplace? In the temple at Rosh Hashanah when he was supposed to. This is another unstated telos that basically, like I said, the Pharisees are sitting there and they're getting slapped. Everybody but them can figure this out, I guess. I don't know. It's almost funny because they're not getting it. And this is what the last thing it says. It says, the throng don't know. The throng don't know the Torah. They utter a curse. Which goes back to the beginning. In the beginning it said that they claimed that Jesus had a god or demon in him that wanted to kill him. Or that, what's the god or demon in you that you believe that they're trying to kill you? And yet who were trying to kill him? The Judeans, the Pharisees, the Sadducees were trying to kill Jesus. That's what it said. So the throng don't know the Torah. And therefore they utter a curse. So this is an unstated telos that points back, and this is what John closes the whole argument with. The whole argument is, okay, what just happened to the credibility of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? It's nothing, right? It's totally, basically in the point of, what do you think the point of chapter 7 was to do? If you look at this just as, I think it was to show us what really happened, right? The history. But if you look at it from a Greek document standpoint, what did 7 just do?
Showed that Jesus was the Christ and that the Pharisees and those religious leaders didn't have any credibility.
Right. It decimated their arguments. It basically took their arguments, all the arguments they had, and that's what it relates, is those arguments, and basically made a argument, a logical argument from Jesus' mouth that decimated their arguments. And he's using, we'd say this is excellent use of both the evidence, the verbal evidence and the evidence of the events that happened. We know about it, right?
It's almost like they want to keep their power and they don't want the Messiah.
Oh, we'll see even more of that.
Right, and
Yeah.
that was their whole point, is looking for the Messiah. And look, this guy does it. He fits everything, but they're so upset and trying to keep the people from being aware. I don't know. It seems like, they're just want the power. They don't want the truth.
Yeah, if you're going to say, this is not fiction, this is actual history, this is beautiful history and historical documents, but this would be a Greek tragedy, right? The Greeks reading this would go, wow, I hear this Euripides, right, when I see my plays.
This makes more sense for the Sadducees because they have no hope of resurrection. So if they deny the Christ, what of it? When we die, we're dead. But for the Pharisees, it has eternal consequences.
Well, and we're going to find out, that's the whole point, is were they convinced? See, it talks a lot about the Pharisees not being convinced, but we find out like later in history, right? In Luke, it says many of the priests came to know Christ. Yeah, in Acts.
But Luke
Yeah.
wrote it, I think, right?
But Luke was written to Theophilus, who was probably the high priest at the time, right?
I know we're already over time, but with all of these statements of the Pharisees, basically they're dead wrong about everything, or like the opposite of what they say is true.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that they say that this crowd that does not know the law is accursed, and it just reminded me how Jesus told them, you don't really understand the law. They're kind of, it almost sounds like this text is saying they're the crowd that doesn't understand the law that's accursed. Not the ones they're blaming.
And of course, you always root for the other dog. Anyway, thank you, Father, for your word. I think this day, look after